Okay, hi guys. Margot here, and this is Death by Southwest. And unfortunately, Jenna is not here. And I'm not even gonna try and get into why, because I know that I feel like there's always an excuse as to why the episode's late, why Jenna's not here, something like that. Basically scheduling. There was scheduling issues. Jenna did kind of did me a favor. I didn't have to. I was invited to go up to Phoenix Sunday night to meet my boss. I produce comedian Jim Brewer's podcast, and I've been doing that for about 6 months. Never met him in person. So he had a show up there and was kind enough to invite me. And Jenna came with me, so I didn't have to go alone. And between that and just other things, we just couldn't seem to connect this weekend to get this recorded. So here I am on Tuesday at 5:00, trying desperately to get this out to you guys. Yeah. So that's where we're at. And I was gonna kind of talk about going up to Phoenix and seeing Jim's show and meeting him. However, I've actually kind of stopped looking at the reviews. We don't get that many anymore, but I happened to look at one the other day, and it caused me to think, well, maybe I'm not going to talk about it. And I know I've said before, reviews help the podcast, period. It just helps the podcast be more kind of discoverable. And personally, the feedback to me is extremely helpful. So good, bad, or indifferent, I just think it's always good to get feedback on what you're doing. But that being said, I think we've talked about that. We try not to take it like too seriously, too much to heart, at least the bad stuff. The good stuff, I'm like taking it right to heart. So I saw two actually, one from Sunday that said, please get to the show. Way too much information, not relevant to the show. That's from BEI. That's fair. And then from Ms. Zadie, yep. I really like the podcast, but she talks so much about herself that I feel like I didn't get enough about the crime, and her rambling can seem a little self-centered, which I think I've mentioned before, that talking about myself, talking about updates on my life, doing an episode about Izzy, about Mark, about Greece, things like that, that it does make me feel it feels a little self-indulgent. Like, who really gives a fuck about me? You're here for the true crime. Of course, I've gotten feedback from other people that's like, no, we love, you're a good storyteller. We like hearing about your life. And I'm sure that that's the case, that there are people who like it and people who are like, who the hell is this chick and why the fuck do we care what she's saying? Which is fair. So I'm going to skip all of it today. And I know we didn't have a bonus yesterday. I know that we are just super inconsistent lately, and that must be super annoying for people who actually like the podcast and want to hear it. And I do apologize for that. And I'm going to stop. I feel like in the past I've been like, oh, I'm going to do better, and I promise it's going to be like this. I'm going to stop making promises, because I'm doing the best that I can at this point. This is not really a job. It's more of a hobby, and I enjoy doing it, but the work that pays me has to come first. And so sometimes this suffers because of it, and that sucks. And I'm sorry. And I'm not going to apologize anymore, because I get a lot of messages from people like, you apologize too much. So we're just going to jump right into the story today. And I guess, if someone is dying to hear a personal story about mine and Jenna's trip up to Phoenix and meeting Jim and all of that, let me know, and maybe I'll record a little extra something. But for the many listeners who are just here for the true crime, we are going to get right into that. And I am once again recording on video, which I hate, but if I ever find the time to make social media clips, it's a lot easier to do when you have a video. So, and the video episodes will always, the full thing goes on YouTube. Nope, the full thing goes on Patreon. The first 15 minutes usually goes on YouTube. And last week I tried to do something new. I tried to add like pictures. Like when I was talking about the victim, I added a picture. When I was talking about the blue pickup truck or things like that. So I'm going to try to keep doing that. I don't know if people like it or not, but let me know. So I'm going to put my video behind all of this stuff so I'm not distracted by trying to not have a double chin in this video. Okay. So today we are headed to Phoenix, Arizona, where two 27-year-old best friends and roommates were living their best lives. That is, until one winter day in 2010, someone entered their suburban Phoenix home and committed an unthinkable crime that has left their families and the authorities puzzled for years. And did I already say that we're not going to do a sense of place? Maybe not. We're not going to do a sense of place today because this story takes place in Phoenix. Last week, this story took place in Glendale, I think, which is Phoenix. And we've had a handful of other stories that are in Glendale, Mesa, Tempe, Scottsdale. I actually don't think we've had one in Scottsdale, but all those places. So it feels redundant to do a sense of place for Phoenix, which I knew at some point that would happen, with a limited kind of locations, just Southwest locations. At some point, we're going to have covered most of them. So we're going to skip the sense of place. If you are dying to know more about Phoenix, there are past episodes where you can go listen to the sense of place, but I'm guessing no one's dying to know more about Phoenix. As I said last week, I'm not a huge fan of Phoenix. It feels like a giant parking lot in the middle of the desert. And when I actually noticed when me and Jenna were up there, because we were driving, we went to like Trader Joe's before we went to our hotel and stuff. And I was like, it's not that ugly. There are parts of Phoenix that are really lovely. And we were kind of right on ASU campus. I was like, it's not as ugly as I kind of always picture it in my mind. I picture it just literally as like highways in the middle of the desert, just brown. And it's not. The area where we were was actually like kind of nice looking. Trees and not a ton of trees. Also, I spent 10 years in Georgia. So 10 years in Georgia, which is like the most green, lush place I've ever lived. And then coming back here, it was a big difference. So I use the word green and trees lightly, but there are parts of Phoenix where there's like no trees. No, it is just brown. So this part of, we were actually in Tempe, it wasn't so bad. And I was like, maybe it's not so bad. Phoenix isn't as kind of ugly as I make it out to be in my mind. I was like, but something's just different about it than Tucson. And there's many, many things that are different about it than Tucson that I won't get into. But one of them that I had never really noticed until this moment was you can't see any mountains. So in Tucson, you can be almost anywhere in Tucson and see mountains, some mountains, if not multiple mountain ranges. In Phoenix, it just looks flat, like there's no mountains. And that makes a huge difference in the attractiveness of the landscape, I guess. For those of you who are watching on video on Patreon, because this video will go on Patreon, I'm standing up. So usually I do this sitting down at my desk in the office. I'm standing up in the kitchen. I have this like stand-up desk. It's not a stand-up desk. I have this, it looks like a giant TV tray basically that I put on top of the kitchen table. Allows me to stand up while I work, which I really like. So I thought I would do it for this. Okay. So today we are going to talk about Nicole Glass and Melissa Mason. And Melissa, her nickname was BB. And that's how I'm going to refer to her because there's actually another Melissa that will enter into this story pretty quickly here. So as to make sure that it doesn't get confused, it's going to be Nicole and BB. So Nicole and BB were both 27 years old. They were both bartenders at a strip club, I believe. I know that BB worked at a place called Sweet Spot in the past. I'm not sure if that's where they met or not. But they had been roommates for 5 or 6 years and were both working at the same strip club at the time of our story in 2010. They lived together in a single story brick home in Phoenix, just south of 42nd Street and Thomas Road. I saw two different things. I saw that Nicole owned the house and she bought it in 2006. I saw that BB owned the house and she bought it in 2006. Kind of irrelevant to the story. So one of them owned the home, though. So Nicole was born in Los Angeles, but her family moved to Arizona when she was in the 6th grade. She was the oldest of 2 kids, and her sister Jessica were 5 years apart. Nicole's mom, Rachel, said they were very close to the point of driving her crazy, but they also would fight like crazy. Nicole's mom, Rachel, said she was a handful, a really upbeat person, a huge personality. She was a horseback rider. They owned horses here in Arizona. And so she learned to ride and loved it. She was also a prankster. She loved to play tricks on people. And at the time of this story, she was a junior at the University of Phoenix pursuing a degree in communications. BB was born and raised in Tucson. She was the oldest of 4 girls. And most of her family still lived in Tucson at the time of this story, including her younger sister, Samantha. She was younger by 7 years. And Samantha and BB were the closest out of the 4 sisters. Samantha said, quote, she was very goofy, loyal, sometimes a bit of an airhead. I always said she reminded me of Reese Witherspoon's character in Legally Blonde because she's very book smart, but also a little ditzy. Samantha also said that her sister was the one person she always wanted to be around. Just her aura and her presence would make you feel at ease. So, very little backstory on the girls, but that's what we have. And we are going to now move to December 3rd, 2010. It's about 7:30 in the morning, and Melissa Massey calls her friend Nicole to try and see if she wants to hang out later in the day, but the call went right to voicemail. This really surprised Melissa because they talked multiple times a day, every single day on the phone. They were very close, and Nicole's phone was never off. But Melissa thought, well, it's still pretty early, so, not that weird. Maybe she's asleep. Maybe her phone died and she's still asleep. So Melissa decided she would go to the gym and then give Nicole a call after. She did that. Called Nicole again, right to voicemail. So Melissa decided to try Nicole's roommate, BB. Her phone went right to voicemail. She wasn't concerned, but she was just like, it's just weird. I'm just going to go by their house. And she did. So she pulled up to their house. Both cars were in the driveway. Both Nicole and BB's cars were in the driveway. And Melissa actually had a key to the house. That's how close they were. So she knocked. They didn't answer. She thought maybe they're still asleep. Who knows? So she tried to open the door, but she couldn't get in because the lower lock on the door must have been locked. So, and this was really confusing for me. I know it seems like a small detail, but it's pertinent. And I could understand if it was like the chain was locked, but I was like the lower lock. And then I realized that my house has something similar. So my back door, it has a deadbolt lock on the actual door. And then it has, like one of those turny little knobbing things on the doorknob. And from the outside in the back, there is a key that fits into the doorknob, so you can turn the doorknob, but there's no outside lock to open up that top lock, that top padlock. So it's essentially does the same thing as like having a chain on your door, but it's like a deadbolt. And so from the inside, I can lock that. And like Jenna has a key if she wanted to get in. If that's locked, she can't get in because there's no way to unlock that from the outside. I definitely over explained that, but I was having trouble picturing it. So this was weird though. So she unlocked the door, but the deadbolt, whatever, was locked. And they apparently never did this. So she was like, something is off. Both their phones are going right to voicemail and I can't get in the house. And they have the locked that's never locked. So she was like, okay, this is weird. So she decided to walk around the back to see if the back door was open. And when she's in the back looking through the back door, she looked in, through a nearby window and noticed that someone was laying on the floor. She couldn't see the full body. She just could see someone's arm sticking out from like her vantage point laying on the floor. And she was like, oh, something is wrong. So she called the police immediately. Police arrived quickly on the scene. They couldn't get the door unlocked, so they actually had to kick in one of the windows to get into the house. They found They found BB first. She was face down in the dining room, her shirt pulled up from the back towards her head, and there was a little bit of blood that was starting to pool on the floor beneath her. And as they continued walking through the house, they next found Nicole. She was in the adjoining family room, also lying face down. Both women were pronounced dead on the scene. Police officers cleared the home, made sure that there was no one else in the home, and then they roped off the house and submitted for a search warrant to kind of further investigate. Now, what's weird is that this was noonish, I believe. And they did not get the warrant to go back into the house. They were able to go into the house to determine that whether the women were dead or alive or what was going on, but then they couldn't do more than that at that time without a warrant. So they left. They didn't get a warrant until 10 p.m. that night. That's 10 hours, which I had no idea. I actually don't think myself and Jenna have talked about this much, if at all, but apparently that's quite unusual. Usually when there's a dead body involved, it's something that happens pretty quickly. And I looked it up to see if I could find out more information about it. But most things I found were pretty subjective to the situation. Depends on a range of factors, jurisdiction, circumstances of the case, availability of evidence. But if there's clear evidence and probable cause, generally law enforcement can get a warrant quickly. And in this case, there were 2 dead bodies. That's probable cause that something went wrong here. So you would think that they would get that quickly. Sometimes in under an hour, it can happen. This took 10 hours. No information was provided as to why. That was one of the many question marks in this case. So while they're waiting on this warrant, the cops kind of put together a mobile command unit outside of the home and wasted no time finding the first witness to talk to, who was Melissa, the friend who had showed up at the house and then called the police. Melissa was visibly very upset when she found out that both women were dead. And her statement to the police only added to the heartbreak of this entire scene, because she told police that BB was pregnant. And this detail changed things actually somewhat significantly, because under Maricopa law in Maricopa County, Arizona, if someone is pregnant and you murder them, that baby, that unborn baby, is considered a murder also. So now this was a triple homicide, not just a double homicide. Melissa told police she didn't really know BB all that well. She was very close with Nicole. And all Melissa could really offer police about BB was the first name of the baby's father, Marquis. And she said she thinks he drove a maroon Chrysler that had, quote, fancy wheels. When it came to Nicole, Melissa was able to tell them a lot. They were very close friends. She said that their last conversation was the night before over the phone. Nicole had said to Melissa that she was waiting on a ride for a private bartending gig at a private party, but she didn't tell Melissa where the gig was, who it was for, or who was picking her up. And they didn't speak again after that. Melissa said she missed a text message that Nicole sent around 11:15, venting that like no one had shown up to pick me up for this gig, and no one had even called. So she basically texted her friend Melissa, kind of bitching about like, I had this gig tonight. Remember I told you about the gig earlier, and I'm waiting for this ride. I got all ready, and nobody's showing up. So Melissa cooperated completely. She let the police search her car. She provided names of other people that they might want to talk to. And I believe she also provided her DNA. So she was essentially cleared of any involvement pretty quickly. And not long after talking to Melissa, kind of like right on cue, a man in a maroon car with what, I think most people might consider fancy wheels showed up on the scene and was confused and was like, why are there all these police at my girlfriend's house? This is Marquis, the father of BB's unborn child. Police immediately asked to interview him right there on the scene at their mobile command center. They asked him, what do you think is going on here? And why do you think there are so many police here at your girlfriend's house? And Marquis said, I don't know. Does it have something to do with last night? And I mean, obviously, Marquis has no idea what's going on. Police are looking at him as a potential suspect right off the bat. And so when he says, does it have something to do with what happened last night? Police are like, well, what happened last night? So Marquis explained that he had been there at the house the night before with Nicole and BB, and Nicole had gotten a call about a private bartending gig.